Okay. Well, folks, we have a treat. Marion's going to come up and talk about honeybees and taking care of bees and her trials and tribulations. And Marion, please come on up.
Thanks, Mark. Finally, I get to see everybody who's here instead of sitting in a row. My name is Marion. My husband is Rick. We have lived in Kidmount for quite a few years. We've been homesteaders for quite a while. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys a little bit. Now, this is sort of an overview of our journey, and it's not really an in-depth bee, like nothing instructional about bees. We can do that later. But I'm curious as to how many people here have bees already. Does anybody have bees yet?
They died.
They died.
I've been stung by
That's
bees.
a common complaint. Sorry?
I've been stung by bees.
You've been stung by bees? Yep. They may have been mine a few years ago, right? Does anybody want to get started in bees or try bees? Okay, all right. Okay, that's good, because that gives me a little bit more direction in terms of where we want to go. Okay, so we moved here in 2005. We started homestead, so we moved in November. In 2006, I have always wanted to keep bees. I actually tried to convince my dad to keep bees ever since he brought some beekeeping equipment home from the auction. And I don't know if you've ever been around beekeeping equipment, but it smells amazing. And it sat in our basement for 50 years. I actually acquired it. He gave it to me when I started beekeeping many, many years later. Anyway, so in 2006, we met some organic farmers that lived down the road, and they said, we have a friend who's looking to get out of the business, and you should go and learn from him. So I did, and that was Heritage Hollow Apiary, just outside of Lindsay. If you guys are local from the area, you may remember the name. He ran 300 colonies. It was a big deal for him. It was his main source of income. His name was Ted Pachersky, and anyway, it was awesome. Both Rick and I sort of worked with him on and off. He was our mentor, anyway, yeah, that was 2006. So I apprenticed with him in 2006. Anyway, and then I'll just backtrack a little bit. We also got into chickens, ducks, and guinea hens. The guinea hens didn't last very long. Then we added honeybees. Then we ended up growing our gardens. And then for 10 years, I was the president of the Kidmount Farmers Market as well as a vendor. I did a lot of the shows around here. I did the Kidmount Fair. I did down in Port Perry. I went all over the place selling honey. In the beginning, it was for Ted, selling Ted's honey, and then eventually that became my own honey. And the main things that we sold were the honey and bee products, so beeswax candles and cosmetics and I don't know, was there anything else? Just bee honeycomb, sorry?
Butter.
Yeah, honey butter and things like that. We also did garlic on a really big scale. We did 4,000 to 5,000 garlics that we sold. That was probably a bigger source of income than actually the honey. It was more predictable, and we did eggs and veggies too. When we started out, our primary goals were organic food to feed our family. I was a stay-at-home mom. I had 2 kids, and I wanted to, contribute to the income a little bit. I always had this dream of having like a place where we would do tours and people would come and learn about organic farming and come and meet the bees and all that kind of stuff. And of course, that was our passion, was that. We lived in Innisfil until we outgrew our little backyard square, which was full of gardens, and we were like, we got to get out of here. Interesting tidbit. We had our daughter at a Waldorf school in Barrie, which is an anthroposophical school, or based on Rudolf Steiner. Anyway, all her friends lived on acreages, and they could run and run and run. The kids could run. Our daughter could literally run the length of our backyard. So that was when we realized, we just sort of saw that, and we thought, we need to get out of here. You don't even realize how, when you live in a box, how you restrict your thinking and everything else that goes with it. It's amazing. Anyway, so these are some pictures of our meat birds. This is the garden at our old house. So we lived on Galway for 15 years, and then we've just recently moved deeper into the woods. But that was our old garden. We did meat birds there. That's some of our freshly extracted honey. Some of the obstacles, Joanne covered some of this. Money, everything costs. All your plans, you have to be really savvy. You have to plan, right? And you're just really creative sometimes about how you can get things done. Time, manpower. When we started out, we were we needed to be very, very frugal. And it was, Rick did ricker-tilling in our garden. No rototiller, we just ricker-tilled and Marion tilled, just bit by bit. Pests and wildlife were huge. This was our greenhouse at that place after a windstorm, so it was done. Didn't work, won't try that again.
That's about 400 yards from where it was.
Yeah, exactly.
It's in a tree.
It's in a tree and it's up on its end. And then you can see up here, I don't know if you can see in this picture, but you can see the bear pulled the chicken coop through and then went and destroyed the little colony that I had there. So weather and impatience is another really, sometimes it can bite you later, right? If you don't do it right the first time or take the time to do it right the first time, then you end up scrambling later. So at first our apiary was called Heritage Hill Apiary. So after that first summer with Ted, he gave us 3 colonies. And before I brought the colonies home, this is one of those impatience things. Before I brought the colonies home, I asked all my neighbors, when was the last time you saw a bear? Do you think I'll be okay? I'm just going to put the bees out. We don't have an electric fence yet. Well, we put the colonies out there in the place we wanted them. Within 2 weeks, they were finished. They were just shredded. A bear came up through the swamp and just destroyed it. So we were like, okay, we need to regroup. The next year, we bought 10 full colonies. So that's, I'll show you in the next picture, but that's 2 brood chambers. Usually these days you're buying nukes or splits, which are just a half a colony, so half the number of bees. But we bought 10 full colonies, which we then brought home, and then we multiplied them right away, which was a really worthwhile investment for what we wanted to do because we really wanted to go big. We actually went to the Economic Development Corporation for Peterborough County. We drafted up a business plan. We registered a business, and they approved us for a $40,000 loan. And then by the end of that summer, I realized, well, if all my bees die over the winter, and I've taken out a lien on my house for $40,000, I'm in big trouble, right? So we just decided to go small and work our way up slowly. And then as some of you may have noticed, some years in beekeeping, you do really well, and some years you lose almost everything. I haven't figured out a for sure formula at all. There were years we lost 50%, and then there were years like not this year or the year before that, 3 years before that, I had no losses, winter loss at all, and I'm not even sure why. When we started in 2007, going full tilt with the bees, there were no varroa mites, which is one of the main pests for bees. They weren't in Kinmount yet. They had not come that far north. Which is mind-boggling to me because now there's nowhere in Ontario, I don't think, where they don't have them. And now we have the same problem with hive beetles. That's going to be the next pest that's coming up the line. I haven't noticed them yet, but I know that they're in Peterborough for sure already. So they're working their way up. So this was what our apiary looked like. So when I was doing it as a business, I had 3 yards. I had somewhere 30-ish. I tried to always keep it at 30. Sometimes it was above, sometimes it was below. But yeah, that was our yard. This was our bear defense system. So there's chain link fence here. And then electric fence across the top, and then electric outside of the chain link. This was where we went in and out. So this is just strands of electric. The bear got in there many times. It was, I complained to the bee inspectors often, and they said, well, Brenda Perrins is one. It's Mike and Brenda Perrins are a husband and wife beekeeping team, and they said, you can build a fortress around your bees. If a bear wants to get in, they're going to get in. They had a story about someone who built a stone wall around their bee yard, and the bear climbed the tree and jumped in, and then was trapped in. So I can't even imagine what damage the bear would have done. Anyway, so that's our bee yard in 2016. Now it's considerably smaller. That was just taken on Monday, so that's what they look like right now. And I just have the 6 hives, and I'm just trying to keep it at 6. That's all I can manage, or I'm interested in managing at this time. But I did keep most of my equipment, so I can upsize if I need to, if the need arises. So one thing that we learned when we moved to to our second place here in Kinmount, was we were going to fortify everything. So we built a compound. You can see we have a much higher fence. We have electric all the way across. So this is 6 feet, Rick?
Yeah.
Yeah, 6 feet with electric fence across the top. Our chickens are in there as well. So that's the chicken coop, also a fortress. The chickens and the bees are in the same enclosure, so they have bees go any way they want, but the chickens have this huge enclosure. It also goes all the way around our veggie garden. When COVID hit, we expanded our veggie garden, so part of it's outside of that, but we had to fence it from the chickens when we let them free.
And we've never had a predator in our yard.
Yeah, we've seen the bear come through once in the 5 years we've been there. The deer do walk right over the fence out on the outside and walk in, but we just plant garlic and onions and things like potatoes and things, so they aren't terribly motivated to go in there. Anyway, okay, back to beekeeping. So if you're thinking about beekeeping, there are a couple things you need to consider. You need to plan to have hive boxes. I would always say, if you're going to start beekeeping, get 3 hives, either 3 full hives. I'm a fan of buying the entire full colony. Buy it in the spring. You'll probably have to wheedle a beekeeper for that because they don't want to part with those. But maybe you can find someone who's retiring and will sell you the full, nice, strong. There's this wonderful expression, boiling over with bees. You want a colony like that, 3 of them. And then you have a really good chance of making it through the winter. You can split them right away when you get them, or over the course of that summer, meaning you divide them. They naturally, when they swarm, that's their natural, that's how they repropagate themselves, right? So you want to try and catch that before that happens, and then keep the bees yourself. So you need to think about the bee equipment that you need for those 3 hives. For extra hives, you need all the parts. Each beehive has frames, lids, inner covers, bottom boards. You need to think about winter wraps or other winter protection. You need to think about food, whether you're going to feed them sugar or pollen, like pollen patties or protein. You need to consider medications, organic or conventional. Obviously you need the protection. I would like to say though that my Gallagher fence, electric fence, which is I don't know what the voltage is, I don't know if you remember. It's for bears, and it's lasted me, it's the only fence I've had this entire time, so almost 20 years. So there's a plug for Gallagher. You also need to consider a bee suit and gloves, smoker, hive tools, and bee brush. And sometimes people say, I'm going to do it without a suit, and that's fine, but when you do it by yourself and you drop a box, you are probably going to regret not having a suit on. So, even if you don't think you need one, you might want to have one for those days when they're particularly grumpy, or if you're doing bees on your own, just something to consider. For bee products, so you also need to think about processing, right? So you need to plan to have an area that can get super sticky and full of bees. So a kitchen is really not ideal, especially if you have kids or little kids running around. Bees end up on the floor, and it can get super messy and sticky. When you uncap your frames, even if you do it super simply with like a scraper, you need somewhere to put that stuff and then some way to process it. I just generally feed it back to my bees and then I melt the wax down, but anyway, there's lots of options for that. You need to think about a way to extract your honey. You need to have strainers and filters for both your honey and wax. You need to have a bottling tank. Pots for rendering beeswax, bottles, pails, and other storage containers. You need candle supplies if you're going to be collecting wax. And then if you want to be collecting pollen, a lot of people are taking pollen supplements. So then you'll need to think about purchasing pollen traps. And if you want to get into propolis production or making propolis tinctures, you need to think about that as well. These were just some of the products. That's the little store that I had. Those are big wax pucks that I've rendered down, and then that's just some of the candles that you can make. Rick just built me a brand new honey house. It has not even been used. I put a picture in here so that you can see, basically what you would need. This is an extractor. Oh, I have this. I haven't even used it. Look at that. This is an extractor. That's a 10-frame extractor, so I can put 10 frames in at once. This is a bottling tank. The little spout's broken, so I have to find a replacement part. But I have a bunch of these pails. They're invaluable. They're all, like Joanne said, they're great from Kawartha Dairy. For melted, you need a scale. That's essentially it for honey processing. I use this for melting down the wax. This is another one of those pucks of wax. And here you can see a bunch of frames. These are all brand new replacement frames, and then these are the honey supers. And I'm going to keep them separate in the honey house because you want to keep them nice and clean because that's where the actual honey goes. That's not where the brood is. And it's just nice to keep it a little bit cleaner. In terms of beekeeping resources in our area, we have a Central Ontario Beekeepers Association. It's the local association for us. It usually meets a little bit further south in Cavan area. We have the Ontario Beekeepers Association. There's the Tech Transfer Team, which is they teach an awful lot of courses, and they're really fantastic. If you have the opportunity to go take a course from this group of people, they're really super knowledgeable. They are always trying to move towards more natural forms of beekeeping. So they're very open to discussions about organic beekeeping. There are definitely treatments out there to help keep your bees organic. There's the Honey Council of Canada, which is a government-run organization, and then there's the OMAFRA, which is the farming, whatever it is. Bees, they do consider bees livestock. And you can tell what I think of them.
Ones you give your money to.
Yeah. If you are going to do tours and, or bring people onto your property, you may want to consider getting insurance. The catch there is the only way you can do that is to register your bees with OMAFRA, and then you can buy group insurance through the Ontario Beekeepers Association, and because it's a group, it's really reasonable. It's like $200 for $2 million liability. So in the case of somebody having an anaphylactic reaction due to a bee sting, it's up to, I just wanted to put it out there. Because it's definitely something that if you're bringing people onto your property, you may want to consider, right? And then I'm sure you guys have all seen Kawartha Lakes honey in the local stores. So Jerry Gerard, super guy. He's just south of Bobcaygeon. Very knowledgeable guy. He's done this for a really long time. He always strives. If you could guarantee, anyway. I always have this debate with him about organic versus conventional. He says, tell me that it works and I'll do it. Anyway, he's just a really knowledgeable guy. He's involved in a lot of studies. He's involved with a lot of different incentives and trying different things. Really, and he sells nukes, so a good resource if you want to buy you want little startup things, and all around good guy. Now I wanted to mention that when I do beekeeping, I started with the Langstroth hives. Those are the very standard, very typical beekeeping hives, but there are lots of options too. in Croatia, I believe it is, or just maybe Northern Europe, they put their beehives in this, it's like a raised building, and they're all small, and they're all in one big building. So it's like a mailbox, like one of those giant mailbox things, right? They just all have their own little compartments, which is a really novel way of making sure that bears can't get in it. So you would go in from the back, and you access everything from the back. And then I guess from the front you can probably have a look in as well. I haven't seen it in detail, but it really interested me. And I thought if anybody is really interested in doing beekeeping in a different kind of way, and you don't want to put up, electric fences and stuff, I don't believe that they do need electric fencing when they're in that format. So that was really interesting. And then there's the long hive where you just put the frames in, and then let the bees naturally build their combs. So, and I've seen that, but I don't quite understand how they extract the honey out of that. I don't know. I think there's a press, but I'm not really sure. But I know that I think is there anybody here that does the long hives? No? Okay. Anyway. It's interesting, but I personally don't quite understand it. So this is a swarm. That's what they look like in the trees. If you see one and you're thinking about getting into bees, catch it. They will always have a queen. There'll be a completely intact hive ready to go. They'll be full of honey, and it's worth some money. I think a full, when I bought a double-story colony, they were worth $250, right? So I think you're probably looking at a couple $100 worth of, if it's a nice big size swarm to get started with. So always keep a look at, because you never know where you might find them. I actually recorded a swarm in action. So when you're trying to catch a swarm, what you want to do, somewhere in the center there is the queen. And if you get her inside the box, everybody just zooms right in. So I did a video of it. So I was actually standing sort of right in the middle of it all. I had a swarm today. They were hanging in that branch that's now, I've almost ripped the whole branch down trying to get them into the box. I'm hoping that I caught them all. That they'll settle into the box, and that'll be the end of it. The chickens are not very happy. This took place in the yard of the chickens. So the actual bee yard is just off to the side right here. So they really didn't travel far at all. It was probably one of the easiest swarms I've ever had to catch. Sorry, I'm not a photographer.
Marion, you have your outfit on, I take it?
Yes, although they're not stingy. When they're in a swarm, they are not super aggressive. So you can just see them going in, like they're just, yeah, anyway, it's pretty awesome. Swarms are really, really interesting.
And how do you get them inside the box?
Oops, sorry.
I know, but I mean, they're all on the outside now.
So as soon as you can get the queen in there,
Yeah.
they all go to her. So it's a matter, so when you see that swarm hanging there, you want to try and take the entire branch, if you can reach it. Normally you can't, it's almost never that low. I would just take it and shake it right into the box, and then they would all fall in. They get annoyed, and some of them would fly away, but the queen and her attendants would hopefully fall in. And then they all go and follow her, because that's what they do. So you remember that picture I showed you in the beginning of the shredded hive? That was that one. Because I made the stupid mistake because that was like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. I thought, I'll just leave it here until tomorrow and move it back tomorrow. No. The bear king. So that's kind of, that was sort of the overview of our journey in homesteading. I have a couple of little pictures to show, but if there's an interest, I'm more than happy to do a more in-depth session on bees, either at my place or here or whatever works. So just let me know. My name, I did sign up from that homesteading forum. We're just called Rocks and Roots, which is the new name of our homestead. Yeah, if you're interested, or if you even just want to come out, I have extra bee suits. We could always just go out into the bees and just have a look, and you guys can decide whether that's something that interests you or not. I'm open to that. All right, so this is a summer picture of the garden. You can see the bees in the background have their honey supers on. The silver ones are the honey supers, and the one in the front is always a super busy hive, and it's got 2 honey supers on. We just built a greenhouse. Rick just built us a little greenhouse this year, and then we're going to do a second one. It's just a nice picture. And that's how you want your bees to look in the winter. Right covered up. Because you don't have to worry about them at all. They're temperature controlled, they're protected from the wind. It's just, I think people panic when they see their bees like that, but that's the best place for them. All right, so I just wanted to say that we're proud to be part of this community, and we're happy to contribute in any way that we can. As I mentioned, if anyone's interested in a tour, or if you want to just meet the bees, just please connect with Rick or myself. And there's our contact info. Yes?
Is there any impact from the honeybees to like bumblebees and like pollinating, so they can live in harmony together?
They
There's
absolutely
no issues?
live in harmony all the time. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was one question. The second one, you said bee inspectors. So once you pass a certain amount of honey or bees, you have to have people come in and look, or is that optional?
I think there might be a rule about that.
Yeah.
But what you really need the bee inspector for is if you want to sell bees.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
So because we did it as business, we did have a relationship with the bee inspector, and I always sold more honey than I could produce, so I was always looking to buy honey. He always had honey for sale because he has bees himself.
But we haven't seen him in years now.
No, we haven't seen him in years, not for a while, yeah.
I've seen the ads on Facebook. I'm sure all of you have seen the same things where it's like a beehive with a plug in the side and a tap. Is this fact, fiction? Does it work? Is it just a sales pitch? Or
It works when that's called the flow hive, right, or something like that. Yeah, I think I went to a beekeeper meeting when they first came out, and the biggest complaint was that because you don't have to go into the hive, people don't, and so things happen in there that shouldn't happen, and the hive will just, because they do need some management, because they're not living naturally, right? They're living in a place that we've given them, and they generally do pretty well in there, but if you aren't opening it and having a look in there every once in a while to make sure that things are as they should be, then problems can arise. And with the flow hive, because all people had to do was just turn it on, the bees were finding they were just neglected inside. Like the housekeeping part of it was not being taken care of. I don't know. I don't know anyone who has one, so that says something, right? Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I wanted to mention, too, that I don't know if you guys know this, but bees are not native to North America. Did you know that? Yeah. So that's another one of their challenges, right? They arrived in the 1600s from Europe. So they had an uphill battle right from the start. Yeah. Sorry, did you have a question?
Yeah, what would be an ideal landscape, like, living in this area? So now knowing that they're not even native here, but like, what would be the best kind of like backyard to do this in?
I don't think there is a best backyard, and the reason I say that is because at our previous place, we had what we thought would be the ideal location, right? It was all open, lots of grassy area, lots of gardens, and then we moved to where we are now, which is much more closed in, a lot of trees. They always say the bees, they like to face east, like they like the morning sun, so they're not facing east. And those were the 3 best winters I ever had, and 3 of the most productive years I ever had were at this new place. So you know what? You try your best, right? Like you know, make sure they do have lots of sun because they need that to help to regulate the temperature within the hive in the winter time. But they find their food. They fly up to 3 kilometers regularly. That's sort of their daily route. If they have to, they've been charted going 10 kilometers. Obviously, that'll shorten the life of the bees that are doing the traveling. But
Obviously avoid commercial farms and cell towers.
yes, corn. Stay away from any of the cash crops. Yeah, I think that's. Well, colony collapse disorder is pesticide poisoning, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. They can hide it all they want, but it's neonicotinoids and whatever other crap they put on corn in specific. The reason being that it's a neurotoxin, that chemical, and so the bees will fly out, they'll collect the pollen, their brains get, their internal compass is distorted, and they can't make it back to the hive. That's why it's a colony collapse disorder, because they never make it back. So it's like super tragic. Yeah.
You mentioned last time when we spoke that you don't recommend the Russian bees.
I don't, and we had a personal experience with Russian bees, yeah.
I heard they're better for...
They're productive.
They are extremely productive, and they are the meanest things
They're all alcoholics.
I'll tell you, I don't, we actually, so Ted Pachersky had 5, it was just 5 colonies, I think, that were down south. And he had them stacked with supers. You had to literally, I think he had like 5 honey supers, and these are full depth honey supers on top of each of these colonies. Unfreaking believable how much honey they produce. The minute that truck drove up, they were pinging off the window of the truck. So how do they don't even know, like how do they even know who we are? Like, Britt got stung 20 times, or 30 or whatever it was. I got stung 10 times, Ted got stung 10 times, just taking the honey off of them. It was horrible. It was horrible. It doesn't have to be that way, I guess, right? I mean, it's your choice. If you want, you can smoke them all you want. There's nothing you can do. And we had a descendant of one of those queens for a long time, and it was the nastiest hive in my bunch.
Maybe you have to speak Russian to them.
I know. They are mean. In just my experience. I always had kids. My kids were little when I did this, when I got started, so it just wasn't worth it. Yeah.
Does the guy in Kawartha Honey, does he do courses?
No, he doesn't teach course. I don't think he teaches
If
course.
I
He's
can
too
recommend,
busy.
I took a course. There's a Turnview Farm in Elmdale.
Mm-hmm.
He's Paul Turner. He's very, very good guy, and he runs courses each year. So if anybody wants to get into it, I strongly recommend the course.
Yeah. I think taking the courses is a really, really good idea. And I don't know about that beekeeper, but I know the tech transfer team out of Guelph. They travel around and they do levels. Like they do an intro beekeeping course, then they do an integrated pest management where they do talk about all organic practices. And then they do like queen rearing propagating bees, that kind of a thing. So it's definitely, there's lots and lots to learn.
Do you still do garlic?
I do, but not for sale. Yeah.
Marion, how much honey would you get out of a typical hive that's producing well in a year?
So you're looking between 50 and 100 pounds per hive. So that's why 6 colonies really does our family just fine. We don't consume 600 pounds of honey, but I do still sell honey. But yeah, so one of those Kawartha dairy buckets is a 50-gallon pail. It holds 50 pounds, 50 pounds of honey. And that basically is, even for us as avid honey eaters, is a year's supply. So just to give you an idea. So one colony could supply you with enough honey, but you should never just have one colony because then if it dies over the winter, it's gone. Right? So, and you never will have problems selling honey, ever.
Well, sorry, one more question.
Yeah.
I had issues, we spoke last 2 winters, I lost my hive. I've heard some people in Minnesota wintering their hive in a greenhouse and then have like a solar fan to control Do you know anyone who's done that?
I don't know anyone who's done that. I do know that there is an increased number of people who are bringing them in to something over the winter. I don't know that I understand why you would have to go to, like, what is happening, like, I've never had a loss, like, okay, so temperature control, I mean, I get, yeah. Condensation is one of the biggest killers, right? So if it's hot, cold, like more, if it's really warm and then really cold and really warm and there's moisture inside the hives, that's probably one of the worst non-pest or disease-related killers in beehives. That's why I said if they're covered with honey, with snow right from the get-go, that keeps them at a steady temperature and they don't, there's no fluctuation, or it minimizes the fluctuation, right, of temperature within the hive. The 1 year that we lost about 50%, there was mold in every single colony. It was just devastating. They just couldn't process the moisture, right? They couldn't get it out. If you can mitigate that, then I don't know why you would bother putting them inside, but if that's something that, like the climate that you're in, that's a constant problem, maybe that is going to be a problem going forward, I mean, who knows, right? Then being able to keep the hives at a static temperature all winter long, or without huge drastic temperature fluctuations, would be a benefit. So that would be the only reason that I would want to put them inside. They do need that sunshine, so I don't really know how that works in that situation, but the sunshine, like in the winter, you can see them all when on a warm sunny day in the winter, they all come out and they do their poop, right? Because they don't poop in the hive, they try not to anyway. And they all come out and they do a cleansing flight, the dead bees go out, or the old and sick ones come out, they die, and then the whole hive is sort of refreshed when they come back in. So how does that work? I don't know. And that's a natural process, right? So as soon as you start putting them inside something, then I don't know. That's my opinion. I don't understand that concept myself. But anyway, all right. So please contact us anytime if you have any questions.